Welcome to Native Bidaské, Native News Online's weekly spotlight on the people making news and leading change in Indian country.
From a small spark kindled in America, a flame has arisen, not to be extinguished.
We think about independence movements of the 20th century. You don't always recognize the fact that the United States actually started that.
The American Revolutionary Movement served as a model for freedom from oppression.
America is predicated on an idea that tells us who we are, where we came from, and what our forebears were willing to die for.
Collins said no taxation without representation. The fear was, if we give in to this precedent, what will they do in the future?
Crisis changes people. It gave different people different ideas about what they should be doing.
It gave them a space to make this democracy real.
The founders thought we can start over again. We can begin the world anew.
The British objective is to suppress the rebellion, force them to acknowledge the authority of the king.
Washington understands the war he's fighting. He doesn't have to win. He only has not to lose.
He becomes quite eloquent in trying to persuade people we're all Americans.
We see regiments with individuals who are not carrying arms, doing essential labor, including women.
They are at the forefront of this movement.
One of the most remarkable aspects is that you had such different places come together as one nation.
It mushrooms into a global campaign that touches Europe and all parts of the world.
It so excites us that we are the product of a revolutionary moment where the world turned upside down.
To believe in America is to believe in possibility.
Welcome to another episode of Native Bidaské. I'm Levi Rickert, your host. We have two special guests today on this Native Bidaské, and this Sunday on PBS, the American Revolution will be aired, and it will be on for 6 consecutive nights. And we have Jen from Cherokee Film, and Jen, welcome to Native Bidaské. How exciting that Cherokee Nation was able to make contributions to the American Revolution. Ken Burns is just a fabulous filmmaker, as we all know, award-winning and things he has covered. Tell us about, first of all, tell us about the Cherokee Film Office.
Yeah, Oceonagad, it's so great to be here. Thanks for having me. Being asked to be a part of this project was, was really exciting for Cherokee Film and our commission. Ken Burns, like you said, I call him the GOAT, greatest of all time historical documentary filmmaker. So being able to work with him and his incredible team, as a documentary filmmaker myself, was I had a lot of pinch me moments. Learning how they work, but also understanding their process and being brought in as part of this process on behalf of the Cherokee Nation was something that we truly appreciate. And we're glad that they're being inclusive of not only the Cherokee Nation, which played a pivotal role in that history, but also other Native nations and people who were a part of this story.
Yeah, and this was actually done in preparation as America will celebrate its 250th anniversary, the way I understand it. Birthday, I guess, on July 4th of 2026, the United States will be 250 years old. So the Cherokee Nation predates when the country was formed. So I'm really happy that he reached out to you. And why do you think that was really important that the Cherokee were involved?
Yeah, if you look at the history of when Europeans arrived here on Turtle Island, we have been involved since the very beginning. And there's when it comes to talking about the revolution and how America came to be, you can't tell that story without including Native nations and the Cherokee Nation, and a lot of our leaders that were involved in all of those parts of history, all of the different battles and the wars, and a lot of the leaders that we hear about. As in Indian country, a lot of the leaders that we know about from history generally haven't been shared with the broader American public as part of the American Revolution and as part of that history. So it's really wonderful that, there's this platform like PBS, just there's nothing like it. They give a platform for Ken Burns specifically to tell long form journalism documentaries that are able to uncover stories that most people haven't heard about, or they give time to find those characters that maybe are obscure, and to really be able to bring things to light, shine a light where it hasn't been shined. And so I think this American Revolution docuseries covers a lot. There's so much to cover, 6 episodes, and they're long, but everything is, so layered and textured, and our stories absolutely have to be a part of that. So it's really wonderful that we have this platform with Ken Burns and his team, which are so fantastic, on PBS, and to really bring in those Native perspectives is really important and appreciated.
So he reached out to you. How did this happen?
Yeah, so his production company, Florentine Films, reached out to Cherokee Film. They asked if I myself would be an advisor on the project. So their production company has, a room full of advisors essentially that come on, and they all specialize in a different part of something that pertains to the project, a different part of history, maybe an academic who, has studied George Washington at, in depth, or things like that. And so he asked me to come on as an advisor to the project to talk specifically about Cherokee history and Native perspectives, as looking at the project as a whole and making sure that representation is accurate, and giving us the time to make sure that we knew what we were talking about. There are other Native advisors that were on the project as well. But when they called, we were really excited. So I came on as an advisor, and then the Cherokee Film Commission, we have a consulting arm. So we also have, our own in-house consultants that were able to look at the script and the history and make sure and fact check every little thing that we could about the parts that we were asked to consult on. But I have to tell you, his team has done a really fantastic, they're so smart, they're intelligent. They've been working on this for 10 years. So we were able to add some perspective, and that was really wonderful. And they listened to everything we said. But also the other thing that they are doing is they're using they're licensing some video that Cherokee Film Productions has used in our docuseries, which they knew. And they knew about our docuseries, and they love our docuseries. And so they requested specific pieces of footage from our docuseries that will be used in the American Revolution as well. So we also help them with introducing them to other to authors, to artists who are able to create art that accurately depicts Cherokee people, and then a whole host of other ways that we were able to help them.
Yeah, it's really exciting. And you mentioned it was a 10-year project. At what point did Cherokee get involved?
Yeah, I said, when you're doing, I'm sure many people who have worked maybe as consultants, as Native American or tribal consultants, there's this fear about when you're brought onto a project. In Indian country, a lot of times you're brought on, or people try to bring you on at the very end, and they just want you to rubber stamp it and say hey, we wrote this thing. We realize now that we probably should have gotten your perspective. Can you just watch it and say it's good? And that's a fear. And we just do not do that. We will not do that. And so I think that they brought us in, obviously not 10 years ago, but they brought us in more than a year ago as they were getting the script in a good place. And we were able to come in and go watch rough versions of the episodes put together, and we watched them one by one. So I went to New York City, sat in the room full of advisors, and watched each episode, took notes throughout each episode, and then we went advisor by advisor and presented our notes to Ken and his producer team, and then they came back with the next cuts and took everything that we had said into consideration as they moved on to their other cuts.
I think that is really, really, I'm really excited, the idea that they incorporated you in. it really speaks to their desire to have the accuracy, and I'm sure you have provided. Hey, to our viewers who are not familiar with Cherokee Film, talk about what you do, because you are an award-winning, Emmy-winning filmmaker yourself. So tell us about yourself and the Cherokee Film.
Sure. I'd love to. So I started my career as a journalist. I was an investigative journalist, and then I was hired by my tribe, Cherokee Nation, 11 years ago to come over and begin creating content that tells our story on behalf of the Cherokee Nation. So we created a docu-series called OCO, Voices of the Cherokee People. We call it OCO TV for short. It's Emmy winning. We're in our 11th season right now. We saw a lot of success with being able to tell our own stories with our own people, creating jobs for our people, and really elevating the Cherokee Nation to a mainstream audience. And so we wanted to expand upon that. And so over the last 10 years, we have really expanded to create what's known as Cherokee Film. Cherokee Film is an ecosystem. So we have our own Cherokee Film Productions, which is our own production company where we really are focusing on creating all types of productions that tell Cherokee stories. So we have our docu-series, we have feature-length documentaries, we have animations that we do. We have a team that works for like our cultural tourism and our museums. So we have a lot of productions. Then we have our Cherokee Film Commission, which is a film commission like many different states and regions have, where we are sort of like a chamber of commerce specifically for film and television, where we're trying to get productions to come to our reservation, spend their dollars filming in our reservation, hire our people. So we give a cash rebate for every Native American that a production hires on their set. They'll get a cash rebate for hiring those people. So all of those initiatives are, the point is to get more natives into the film and media industry so that we can increase our representation, have more accurate stories told, and that sort of thing. We also have our own sound stages in our reservation. And then we also just launched the Cherokee Film Institute in January. So we're teaching the next generation of filmmakers how to get their foot in the industry and then connecting them with jobs.
That's fantastic, because I like to say it's our time to tell our stories, and Cherokee Nation is obviously doing that. And so, wow, kudos to you. That is wonderful. Hey, what else do you want to say about the Ken Burns project, the American Revolution?
Yeah, I really encourage everyone to, especially in Indian country, to take the time, make an appointment to sit down and watch this docuseries. It's going to teach you things about the birth of this country that you didn't know. There are storylines that you do know, but you'll become more familiar with them. There are so many storylines, though, that you likely don't know. They have uncovered some characters from our history that most people haven't heard of. They also really focus on incorporating women's perspectives into the docuseries, which I appreciated. And then there are some, quite frankly, shocking revelations that I learned through this documentary about, the treatment of, not only Native Americans, but African Americans, and just the detail and the quotes, and the things that you learn that were said and done during this time in history are pretty shocking. But it's also, an interesting study on how this country continues to struggle with a lot of things. And so at this moment in time in United States history is very relevant to the American Revolution. And I think that a lot of the things that we were struggling with back then at the birth of this nation, we're still struggling with today. And so taking a look back at that history, at this moment, I think can add a lot of really great perspective for people that know a little bit, but not a lot.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. There's such a pushback on the history, and without getting political, it's like they always want certain people only want to tell the good things that happen in America, but certainly as Native Americans, and not to get into 500 years of oppression. Given everything that's going on now, it seems like there's almost a sanitation of history. I'm so happy that Ken Burns in this film is able to retain some of the things, because let's just be honest, everything hasn't been pleasant, but at the same time, we came out the other side, and hopefully we all work together now. And what are your comments about what's happening in current stages of affairs?
Yeah, I mean, I also don't want to get political, but I will say it's I think it's really interesting to, learn about the history and how this country came to be, specifically as it pertains to our America's relationship with tribes. And it's a very complicated and complex history, we know. And at one point we're friends with the Americans, and the next we're enemies with the Americans. And learning about all of that, and the difficult choices that we were forced to make, I think is really it's a really important part of our history. So there's also some storylines, like Dragging Canoe as a character in this docuseries, that we in the Cherokee Nation are very familiar with. Nancy Ward, also known as Nanyihi, is also mentioned in this docuseries. And so it's exciting to see the leaders of our tribe, but also other tribes, to be they're quoted, and there are actors. I don't know if you've seen all of the actors that do voiceover for this docuseries, but it is a huge ensemble of A-list actors. So that's very exciting. So I will say that, is this docuseries told from a Native American perspective? No, it's not. But they did incorporate our voices and our thoughts and our advisement into this process. And so I'm glad that it's really inclusive. And I don't think that a lot of people have seen that type of inclusion in this type of storytelling.
Well, thank you very much, Jen, for your input. And we're going to hear from Ken Burns. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Wado.
Welcome to Native Bidaské, Ken Burns. And you have a very exciting documentary coming out this Sunday. It's going to be on PBS, The American Revolution. Tell us about that.
Well, I've been working on it for nearly 10 years. It's co-directed by my longtime collaborator, Sarah Botstein and David Schmidt. And we just wanted to tell a more complicated version of our founding story. Most of what we know about the American Revolution has been sort of sanitized and very superficial. It's only essentially great men in in Philadelphia thinking great thoughts. And while those great thoughts are important, there's many, many other stories. And one of the most important is this was a very violent revolution. Wasn't just us against Britain, but us against many people that were loyalists. It's also a civil war, and it's also a global war. And it's the fourth global war for the prize of North America. And when you say prize, what you mean is the land. And the land has already been occupied for thousands of years by other people. And so by the time we begin our series, 20 years before the revolution, settlers are pouring in the Ohio Valley and in upstate New York and trying to take land. And I think that most school kids would get an A on their paper if they said the causes of the revolution were taxation without representation. But in point of fact, the central story is the taking of Native American land. And we say that at the very beginning. We center the opening prologue is all about Kanasatega and the spokesman for the Six Nations. And we talk about the Haudenosaunee and how that Iroquois Confederacy inspired Franklin to think that maybe the 13 colonies could unite at all. It didn't work out then, but 20 years later, it would be, part of the reason why the United States came together, but of course, at the expense of the Haudenosaunee, as well as all the other Native nations. I mean, they didn't meet in Philadelphia in what was called the Eastern Seaboard Congress. They didn't name George Washington the head of the Eastern Seaboard Army. They called it the Continental Congress and the Continental Army. They knew exactly where they wanted to go. And part of the revolution is understanding that, understanding the role of women, understanding the role of the 500,000 enslaved and free Black people who lived among the 3 million colonists, as well as the Native peoples who had assimilated or coexisted within the borders of those colonies that had once themselves been Native American land. And so we treat Native peoples not as a single they, but a variety of countries, nations as distinct as, say, France is from Prussia, or Belgium is from the Netherlands, or Virginia is from Massachusetts, and have tried to, and certainly Jen has helped us so much with the understanding of the intricacies, particularly with regard, but not limited to, the Cherokee situation in the Southeast. And so this is something that takes up at least one, sometimes two, sometimes three chapters of every one of the six episodes. So we've tried to understand a story, and many stories that just haven't been told, and included in a much more complicated and I think much more interesting and certainly much more factual history of the American Revolution. That, in a nutshell, is our 12-hour, six-part series that will begin broadcasting Sunday and streaming for free on Sunday.
Wonderful. And why did you feel it was essential to center Indigenous nations and their perspectives, not just include them in the American Revolution?
Well, I think that's the problem. Sometimes we just have those token gestures, as if they say about a very dry martini, all you need is to just move the label of the vermouth bottle next to the gin. It just doesn't work for me. As a boy, my father was an anthropologist, and as a boy, I had a map of the United States over my head, and while it had very faint dots outlining the political divisions of the 48 states that were then the United States before Alaska and Hawaii came in, it was really filled with the 300 plus nations that occupied that. So I grew up as the son of an anthropologist, understanding that things just didn't happen the second the Mayflower arrived or before that Jamestown, but a much more complicated and in many cases tragic story. And I've represented that in films about the West, films about Lewis and Clark, films about the national parks, and films most recently about the American buffalo. And it's always important to center all the scholarship that's available. And what we benefited from in the last 50 years since the bicentennial is an enormous amount of new scholarship about the American Revolution that permits us with confidence to not just add on or to pay lip service to, but to fully integrate a Native American narrative with the larger narrative, or the smaller, I guess you could call it, narrative of the 13 colonies and enslaved people and free blacks and women, who are, of course, a majority of the population, but who had little to show once the revolution was over, but were essential to its success. And, you know, it's just a much more interesting story when it tells that, and I'm interested in interesting stories.
Yeah, and with the 250th anniversary approaching, what's the main message you really want to convey? Were you trying to convey in the American Revolution?
Yeah, well, we don't have, we started this 10 years ago. Barack Obama still had 13 months to go in his presidency. So a lot of American water under the bridge for everybody concerned. But we've always wanted to tell a story that would bring in everybody. We're not interested in scoring political points. We're interested in telling what actually happened. And many Native peoples joined the British. They saw that as a way to forestall the colonial advance. Any choice they made was going to be, because if the Britons had prevailed, they'd come and take the land themselves. And if somehow the British had lost in the 7 Years' War, what we call the French and Indian War, the French would have done the same thing. The prize of North America is the prize of North America, its land, and that means moving aside the native peoples that had existed there for centuries. So we just felt that as we suddenly realized, oh my goodness, this is going to come out close to the 250th, and nobody was planning for that at that time. And then suddenly the plans came along, and now I'm really happy that we're coming out, 9 months before the July 4th, 250th of the anniversary of the signing of the Declaration, so that we can have a much more serious and much more nuanced and much more inclusive story of what actually took place, so that we're not drowning in fife and drum treacle and kind of the sentimentalizing of it, and making it just, again, about big ideas in Philadelphia. They're there, and they can't go out. They are among the most powerful ideas about human aspiration that we know. But at the same time, we're a nation born in violence, And you can't tell the story without being accurate about that violence and the cost of it. There are winners and there are losers. And obviously, the United States, the new United States, is the winner, making a territory after the Treaty of Paris that is greater than Britain, France, and Spain combined in area, but it's now pushed Native peoples, or essentially told Native peoples they need to be on the other side of the Mississippi. The worst losers are, of course, the Native people, followed by enslaved and Black Americans and women. And in fact, Britain is not as Britain gets their old trading partner back, more or less, for a while. And the French also lose because we didn't include them, and they were such a repressive regime, even though they helped us out. People rose up in defiant rebellion, copying our rebellion in a very bloody and not so fruitful revolution. So I think understanding the revolution in the context of very intimate decisions at a village to village level, person to person, family to family level, but also as a kind of revolution of ideas, but a bloody revolution and a bloody civil war, and this global war is the only way to go. It's not that complicated. Everybody's smart enough. Everybody knows how to follow complicated plots. Everybody watches stuff on their phone that are equally, if not more complicated than this. This just has the virtue of being true. And you can't say that about a story about the American Revolution if you don't include the Native American dynamics of it. It's their land.
Well, thank you so much for including the Native Americans. And you mentioned some tribal nations sided with the British. I happen to be Potawatomi. In James Clifton, in his book, The Potawatomi, writes about how, had it not been for a snowstorm that happened in Pennsylvania, the British may have overtaken Washington. And so I was thinking about that. It's like
There are so many times when weather and distance plays a decision. When the British were about to wrap Washington up and capture him in Brooklyn Heights after he had made a tactical mistake and left his left flank exposed in the Battle of Long Island, a fog came in and he was able to remove all his troops to Manhattan under the cover of fog. Of course, he attacks the British garrison in the middle of a snowstorm at Trenton, and everybody's taken by surprise. Weather's a big thing. At Germantown, a big fog came in, combined with the smoke of the battle, and the Americans who were winning thought that the firing they heard behind us in one lone house that the British occupied, and everybody advised Washington to go around it, except Henry Knox, his artillery guy, and said, no, don't leave a castle in your rear. And so people got disoriented in the fog and thought the enemy had surrounded them, as they had done at Long Island and Brandywine a few weeks earlier. And what was a sure victory, maybe driving the British all the way into Philadelphia, turns into a rout. And of course, they've got their disastrous winter at Valley Forge, which became for a time the 5th largest city, speaking 10 or 15 languages, including many Native American tongues, as well as many African tongues, and French and Dutch and Scottish and Irish, in addition to English and German. I mean, the story is much more interesting when you include everybody in it.
Yes. Well, and thank you very much for including Native Americans, as I said.
Can I say that? That's the second or third time you thank me. I need to thank you. Okay. I need to thank Jennifer for helping us get it right.
Jennifer is spectacular. Yes.
We have to do this. It's our privilege. It's not. It seems ridiculous that we have to thank us for telling what actually happened. It's our obligation to tell the story. And so we are so grateful that various tribes had helped us do this as we were working on it, and could refine us where we were getting things wrong or overemphasizing this or not doing it. There's some things that Jen knows that we did in the last weeks of editing that did not over-privilege a particular quote, but used it in a way that made it much more bittersweet, as it should be, and not somehow a triumphant ending. I think, Jen, you can talk about the way you helped us not make the traditional mistakes, and how much our thanks go out to you rather than the other way around.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you. And I really do think that Ken and his production team, that is really the way that they saw everything. It's like they're really being inclusive of Native Americans because it's the truth. So it is history. It is what happened. And so I hear being thankful that you are inclusive, but I mean, that's just the reality of, Native Americans and our history of being excluded in storylines where we should have been included. And so Ken's team is, they're all so professional and they're here to tell accurate, truthful stories. And so, of course, we're going to be a part of that process. And so we do appreciate it. But it is, we are part of the story. And I'm glad also that sometimes when people include us in their storytelling, they include us on a surface level and don't actually listen to what we say. And that is something that your team was able to do, is to really listen to what we said and make those, changes based off of that advice. So that was great.
I'm so happy to hear that. I think from the very beginning of the film, as we center the Native American experience in this story, and I think all throughout, treating, we say very early on that what's a clash between Englishmen became a bloody war that included more than 24 nations, European as well as Native American. And we framed it that way so that we were putting those Native nations on equal footing with the European powers. Because I think there is this essential bias that all Native Americans are the same and they live in teepees and, this is it. They're nomadic and don't really care about the land. And it's the exact opposite. There's some places in upstate New York where if you went into a settlement, you would see clapboard houses and panes of glass. And until you saw an inhabitant, you wouldn't have any idea whether this was a European settlement or a pre-existing Native American settlement. And that's really an important distinction to make, that the Haudenosaunee or the Cherokee or the Shawnee and the Delaware are not as singular as, say, Virginia is, as opposed to Massachusetts, or France is Prussia. And that was something that we had to teach ourselves and then reflect and then ask sympathetic people, scholars and others, including Jen, to help us get it right.
In these days, in the time of the president, not to get overly political, but we do live in a time with a pushback of history, and they seem to want to sanitize it one more time. They're reviewing the Smithsonian institutions, museums. I really do appreciate what you've done with this film. So thank you very much.
Everybody likes a good story, and nobody likes a simplified story. Only autocrats like that, and it won't last long. It can't last long because stories get out. People are supposed to love the drama Yellowstone, whose complicated, wise head is a murderer who dumps bodies down a ravine, and his daughter is the same thing. And one of the sons is married to a Native American woman and torn between two worlds, and the other son is like Benedict Arnold, a traitor, and there's the daughter's in love with the foreman who has several ranch hands that are black and white and gay and straight and young and old, and surrounding the whole story is of Native American ownership and of the incredible greed for land that's still going on in Montana. I mean, this is supposed to be a series that conservatives loved, and what is it filled with? Contradictions and undertow and complication. So if you can handle Yellowstone, you can certainly handle the story of the American Revolution and not get your knickers all tied up, worried about having some sanitized Madison Avenue version that never existed, never was, and never will be.
Thank you very much. We've been talking with Ken Burns, The American Revolution, which you can see starting Sunday evening on PBS, and Jen Loren from the Cherokee Film Office in Cherokee Nation, Oklahoma. So thank both of you for coming out to Native Bidaské, and we wish the film has the utmost success and people watch it like crazy out there.
Thank you so much.
Yes. And to our viewers, Chi Miigwech for tuning in to another episode of Native Bidaské. We'll be back next week with another episodes. Till then, as I like to tell you every week, elders, take care of those young ones. Elders, And young ones, give your elders a hug. We're all in this together, and we can make it happen. Miigwech. See you next week.
Thank you for joining us. If you value our warrior journalism for Indian country, please consider supporting our work by scanning the QR code or visiting the link below. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media, and sign up for our free daily newsletter. Miigwech.